clear we're not getting all the information. It's clear something's off here. The first person, the old man, I don't even know why he was grabbed, but he was grabbed and his picture was fondled out. And then there was someone else who was a person of interest, and that didn't work. And then we got this guy. He had a bulletproof vest that might have caught the exit. Really? That's interesting. That's definitely an interesting point of view. But what kind of bulletproof vest are you talking about? Because usually bulletproof vests, they cover your front, they cover your back. There's points of vulnerability on the sides usually. I haven't seen too many. I mean, was he wearing like hardcore Kevlar? Like fully body casted? That's wild. Nobody mentioned that yet. Military grade. He was wearing military grade. I don't know. It's funny. Seems like they might have mentioned that.
Get into the whole thing with the GUN being dismantled, the guy jumping off of the roof without the, weapon. This whole thing looks fishy. And that's why I said, I always say this. I say, I'd rather get all the information first, then make a comment. But yeah, it's just real fishy. Of course. They say
We have a right to question the validity of it. And it's got to pass the smell test. There's something wrong with all of this. And everyone is starting to pick it out piece by piece, thread by thread. Everyone is starting to see something's wrong here. The question is, why?
When people started speaking about the weekend, I told you guys the truth. That's it. Okay. I don't like the fact that Charlie was literally facing financial threats over his speech, the thing that mattered most to him, right? Fighting for free speech. Even if you disagreed with somebody, you got to make sure that they have a right to express their viewpoints. And what happened to me a year earlier seemed to be happening to him 1 year later. I have it now on a very well-placed authoritative source that the FBI is putting an absurd amount of pressure right now on the authorities in Utah and also the rest of the government in Utah to come out and to say that the Charlie Kirk case is closed. They want it over. They want Charlie's assassination to be officially ruled lone gunman. It was a lone gunman that did that. Nobody else is involved. Now, why would they? Why would they want that? Right? What are they saying, at least to the authorities? Are they saying like, this is the reason? And I'm sure they're not coming out and being honest or saying something that might ring truer to us, the public, which would be them saying, well, we know who did this and we want to protect those people, so close the case. What they're actually saying instead is essentially, if you don't close the case against Charlie Kirk and rule it a lone gunman, then it might mess up our prosecution against Tyler Robinson. That feels a little bit to me like moral blackmail. Hey, man, we're not hiding anything, but we've got this guy, Tyler Robinson. If you don't close this case, then it might harm our chances of locking this guy up. Yeah, I'm sure. I am sure that they are being just moral. I'm sure they're telling the truth to the authorities. Now, I want to remind you guys, we should take a look at their current case against Tyler Robinson to see if we should accept this narrative, because currently there is absolutely no video which shows Tyler Robinson firing the weapon or even taking aim at Charlie Kirk. In fact, the individual who filmed the footage of the shooter on the roof, the lone video that exists of the shooter on the roof, also told me that he doesn't think that Tyler Robinson is the guy. So how's that going to work for an eyewitness account? When he reported the shooter on the roof to Utah on the campus, he was clear that the person was wearing an entirely different outfit than the ones that they're currently trying to claim that Tyler wore on that day. Remember?
Forget everything you think you know about the Charlie Kirk story, because Candace Owens is blowing the lid off of it. What was first reported as a tragic, isolated incident is now being painted as a full-blown conspiracy involving billionaires, government agencies, and a silencing campaign that reaches far beyond one man's death. Candace isn't just hinting anymore. She's naming names, showing receipts, and promising to expose the power players she says orchestrated everything. And with a ticking 7-day ultimatum to the feds, the question isn't if this scandal will explode, but how big the fallout will be when it does. Candace Owens just dropped a bomb that no one saw coming. In her words, Charlie Kirk's death wasn't a tragedy. It was a setup. And I can prove it. From the moment she said that, social media went into meltdown mode. Thousands of comments flooded in within minutes, people asking the same question. What does she know, and who is she accusing? According to Candace, the story that America has been spoon-fed by the media is not only false, but part of an elaborate cover-up designed to protect billionaires and government insiders who wanted Charlie gone. She's not being vague this time, either. She's naming names, promising receipts, and warning that if the truth doesn't come out voluntarily, she's going to make it public herself. Candace claims she's in possession of what she calls unreleased communications and direct testimony from insiders who allegedly know exactly what happened in the days leading up to Charlie's death. And she isn't holding back. She says the same billionaires who funded Charlie's movement were the ones who turned on him the moment he refused to follow their orders. According to her, they pressured him, threatened him, and when that didn't work, they silenced him. The part that has everyone on edge? Candace has now given the feds a 7-day ultimatum. 7 days to release the truth, or she'll do it herself. She posted late last night, writing, "You have 1 week. Either the truth comes out, or I will make it come out. Every billionaire involved, every political name, every official who looked the other way, I will expose you." And that's when things got real. Within hours, her post was flagged, deleted, and reposted across backup accounts, fueling speculation that something much bigger was happening behind the scenes. Screenshots of her deleted posts are still circulating, and her supporters are treating this like the countdown to detonation. People are literally watching the clock, waiting to see if Candace will follow through on her threat to release a list of billionaires she claims orchestrated Charlie's downfall. The official story of Charlie Kirk's death has already been questioned since day one. Reports from law enforcement framed it as the act of a lone gunman, a random, senseless tragedy. But Candace insists the truth is far more coordinated and sinister. She says Charlie knew he was being targeted, that he felt watched, paranoid, and betrayed by people he trusted most. And now, she's claiming those same people are working overtime to bury the investigation before anyone asks the wrong questions. What's making this story even more explosive is how fast it's spreading beyond political circles. Journalists, YouTubers, and even international media outlets are picking up Candace's claims, calling it one of the most dangerous allegations of her career. Some say she's playing with fire, while others think she's the only one brave enough to tell the truth. Either way, the tension is unbearable. The feds have gone silent. Candace is doubling down, and the 7-day clock is ticking. Every second that passes feels heavier, and people are starting to wonder if she really has what she says she does. What happens when the countdown hits 0? In the weeks leading up to his death, Charlie Kirk was reportedly a different man. Friends said the confidence that once defined him, that sharp, firebrand energy, had started to crack. He wasn't sleeping, he was canceling meetings, and he seemed haunted by something he couldn't quite say out loud. According to Candace Owens, that wasn't paranoia, that was fear. And not just any fear, the kind that comes from knowing the people who used to bankroll you might now want you gone. Candace claims that in his final days, Charlie was under unbearable pressure from a small group of billionaire donors, men who had invested heavily in his political influence and wanted a return on that investment. They allegedly demanded that he shift his messaging, silence certain voices, and even distance himself from allies like Tucker Carlson. But Charlie refused. He told those around him that he wouldn't sell out his beliefs for a paycheck. And that's when things reportedly turned dark. Candace posted, Charlie Kirk was fighting with some very powerful billionaires that he took money from. The pressure on him was immense over the last 2 weeks. The truth will be revealed. The messages will be leaked. And the movement he built will rise up. That message alone sent chills through her followers because it didn't sound like speculation. It sounded like she knew exactly what was coming. Behind the scenes, Candace claims the threats had already begun. Anonymous calls, cryptic messages, people following Charlie's car after late-night events. One source close to him allegedly told her, he said he felt watched. He said he knew something was going to happen. He just didn't know when. Candace echoed that sentiment, saying they tormented Charlie Kirk until the day he died. According to her, the situation spiraled the moment he pushed back against one particular billionaire, someone who she claims was used to having total control over political figures and media narratives. Candace hinted that when Charlie refused to compromise his message, his funding was pulled, his organization's accounts were quietly frozen, and he started receiving threats about what would happen if he didn't play ball. From that point on, his tone in private reportedly changed. He wasn't talking about the next big rally or speech. He was talking about safety, about enemies, about wanting to protect the people close to him. Those who saw Charlie during those final weeks said he seemed distracted and paranoid, but in hindsight, many now believe it wasn't paranoia at all. It was awareness. He knew he had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. Candace said he was scared, but he still spoke up. That's what makes what happened to him even more tragic. He refused to bow down, and they made sure he paid the price. In one of her most viral posts, she wrote, they pressured him financially, intimidated him publicly, and humiliated him privately. When that didn't break him, they took it further. She's even gone as far as saying that Charlie tried to warn people, dropping subtle hints on social media before his death, cryptic tweets about betrayal, silence, and the cost of truth. Now, looking back, those posts read like a countdown to disaster. By the time the story of his death broke, Candace says she wasn't surprised. She was angry. Angry that the same billionaires she believes were behind it had the nerve to post public condolences and statements of sorrow. She called them out directly, saying, there are a lot of people shedding crocodile tears. The billionaires must be exposed for the frauds that they are. Whether you believe Candace or not, one thing is clear. Charlie's final days were filled with tension, fear, and a sense that something was coming. He told friends he didn't feel safe. He canceled public appearances at the last minute. He even hinted during one podcast that freedom of speech doesn't exist when your donors control your words. And now, with Candace vowing to release the names of the billionaires she says are responsible, his final moments are being re-examined like never before. Candace's followers have already started calling it the setup of the century. To them, Charlie wasn't just a victim, he was a warning. And as the details of his final days continue to unravel, the question that hangs in the air is chilling. If Charlie knew what was coming, how far would those billionaires go to make sure he could never tell the world himself? The moment news of Charlie Kirk's death broke, federal agents were on the scene. Too fast, according to Candace Owens. Within hours, the FBI had taken control of the case, sealing documents, redirecting local authorities, and locking down the investigation for public view. On paper, it looked like efficiency. To Candace, it looked like interference. In her words, the feds immediately interjected. They took the case, they sealed it, and that was the end. The desire to find the truth was never there. Her tweet went viral in minutes, sparking a flood of outrage and confusion. Why was the FBI moving with such urgency on what they called a lone gunman incident? Why were witnesses silenced, files sealed, and details withheld under national security provisions? Candace didn't mince words. She accused the Bureau of running cover for the same billionaire network she says orchestrated Charlie's downfall. They wanted this story buried before the body was even cold, she wrote. They knew what happened, and they needed it to disappear fast. Public skepticism only deepened as the hours turned into days. Local reporters who tried to get answers were stonewalled. Police officers on the ground suddenly stopped giving statements, citing federal jurisdiction. One outlet claimed its interview footage was confiscated without explanation. And when the FBI finally released its first official statement, it was a vague, one-paragraph press release that raised more questions than it answered. The document offered no suspects, no motive, no timeline, just a sterile reassurance that the Bureau was handling the matter internally. That's when Candace doubled down. She went live, her tone sharp and deliberate, saying, "This isn't justice. This is cleanup." The feds didn't want an investigation. They wanted control. And now they have it. She pointed to the strange pattern that's emerged in similar high-profile deaths. Cases that start local, only to be swallowed whole by federal agencies, never to be heard from again. Every time the truth gets too close to power, she said, the same playbook unfolds. Seize the files, silence the witnesses, rewrite the story. Her supporters started calling it Operation Silence. Threads exploded on X, Telegram, and Reddit, compiling every timeline discrepancy, every vanishing piece of evidence, every redacted page. One viral post showed the FBI's official presence at the scene just 43 minutes after the initial emergency call, a response time that even law enforcement veterans admitted was unusually fast. Another user leaked alleged internal memos showing classified handling protocols invoked before any autopsy results were even confirmed. Meanwhile, the public's confusion grew. Was this standard procedure, or something more sinister? Why was there no footage from nearby surveillance cameras, even though the area was reportedly covered in city-owned security systems? Why did two of Charlie's close associates, both of whom were scheduled to meet with him the day before his death, suddenly lawyer up and go silent? Candace's post kept feeding the fire. The FBI's involvement was never about solving the case. It was about containing it, she wrote in another tweet that racked up millions of views. If the truth ever came out, it would destroy people in very high places. She began naming former agents she claimed had ties to the same political donors who once funded Charlie's movement. To her, it was all connected, the billionaires, the political elite, and the federal machine working in unison to protect their own. As the feds tightened their grip, Candace's warnings turned into a rallying cry. Her followers flooded comment sections demanding transparency, filing Freedom of Information Act requests, and tagging mainstream journalists who had previously ignored the story. Some called it the biggest federal cover-up since Epstein. Others accused Candace of fear-mongering. But even her critics couldn't deny that the FBI's rapid takeover looked suspiciously convenient. The timing, the secrecy, the silence, it all felt too orchestrated. The country watched as the agency that was supposed to seek truth instead seemed to be erasing it in real time. Candace summed it up perfectly in one post. The truth doesn't need federal protection. Lies do. And now, as her 7A countdown ticks away, all eyes are on the feds. Will they finally release the documents she's demanding? Or will they keep the case sealed, forcing Candace to make good on her threat and expose everything herself? Either way, the clock is still running, and the world is watching. For days, Candace Owens hinted at something darker than just federal interference. She said Charlie Kirk's death wasn't random. It wasn't political infighting gone too far. It was a hit. A calculated, deliberate hit ordered by what she now calls the circle of billionaires. In her live stream that broke 5 million views in under 24 hours, Candace leaned into the camera and said, "These weren't just donors. This was a cartel of influence. They didn't just pressure Charlie. They eliminated him." According to Candace, this group is not a loose network of rich donors, but a tightly coordinated inner circle. Oligarchs, tech moguls, hedge fund billionaires, and even high-ranking foreign officials who pooled their money and power to create what she calls a shadow cabinet of global politics. She says Charlie's refusal to bend to their agenda made him an obstacle, and obstacles get removed. They weren't sending warnings anymore. She posted on X. They were sending signals. Charlie saw it. He told people close to him. He wrote it down. And I have the receipts. That post alone was screenshotted over 100,000 times before it was deleted, sparking what some are calling the billionaire hit list theory. The idea that Candace isn't just talking, but holding proof. She's already teased what's on it. In one now viral clip, Candace stared straight at the camera and said, "This list isn't just billionaires. There's at least one prime minister of a country at war on it. There are tech giants you trust every day. And there are names you've never heard of, but who control everything you see, read, and believe." She didn't say the names, but she promised she would if the feds didn't release the truth by the end of her 7-day ultimatum. That's when the story went from shocking to seismic. Suddenly, this wasn't just about a conservative firebrand being silenced. This was about a global power structure operating above governments, above elections, above laws. A story bigger than Watergate, bigger than Cambridge Analytica, bigger than Epstein. At least that's how Candace is framing it. Her followers have dubbed it the billionaire plot. Telegram channels, Substack newsletters, and YouTube live streams are all speculating on who's on the rumored list. Some think it's a handful of well-known figures. Others believe it's a global cabal spanning Silicon Valley, Wall Street, and foreign governments. The phrase, "one prime minister of a country at war," has turned into a meme, a hashtag, and a chilling question mark that no one can shake. Candace herself is playing it like a slow-drip thriller. Every day, she posts a new breadcrumb, a partial screenshot of a text, a photo of a redacted email, a name with the first letter only. In one post, she wrote, "When you see the names, you'll understand why the FBI is terrified. You'll understand why Charlie's death couldn't be left to local police. You'll understand why they've tried to destroy me for even speaking this." Even some of her critics, journalists who have spent years fact-checking her, are quietly admitting on Twitter Spaces that if she has what she claims, it could be the biggest political scandal of the century. "This isn't just a domestic story anymore," she said in her latest live stream. "This is global. This is who's really running your countries, your media, your lives." With every post, the tension builds. She's positioned the story not as a partisan fight, but as a world-shattering revelation. She's essentially telling her audience, Charlie Kirk's death was not the end point. It was the warning shot. The billionaires she's naming aren't just players in politics. They're architects of the system itself. And in 7 days, if the FBI doesn't act, she says she'll push the button herself. "I'm not threatening. I'm promising," she said in one of her most watched clips. "If they think they can scare me into silence the way they did to Charlie, they're wrong. I'm still here, and I'm not alone." As the countdown clock ticks, that rumored list has become the most talked about file on the internet. A mythical bombshell everyone wants, but no one's seen. If she's bluffing, it's the most audacious bluff of her career. If she's telling the truth, it's a scandal that could reshape everything we think we know about power. If Candace Owens was the spark, Jaguar Wright became the flame. Within hours of Candace's ultimatum going viral, Jaguar jumped online with one of her signature rants. Unfiltered, furious, and impossible to ignore. Sitting in her car, camera shaking, eyes wide with conviction, she said what millions were thinking but afraid to say out loud. They killed that man. And now they're trying to bury the story the same way they buried him. Jaguar, who's built a reputation as one of the most outspoken truth-tellers in entertainment and politics, didn't just echo Candace's claims. She expanded them. To her, Charlie Kirk's death wasn't just about politics or billionaires. It was about power itself, the kind of power that crosses industries, crosses oceans, and uses fame, money, and fear to keep everyone in line. She said, "This isn't about left or right. This is about top and bottom, the powerful and the powerless. They silence anyone who talks too much, anyone who gets too close to the truth." Charlie was one of them. Now look what happened. Her live went instantly viral, not because it was new information, but because it felt like confirmation. Jaguar claimed that people in high places, both political and corporate, had known for days that something was coming. She said she received calls warning her to stay quiet about Charlie's death. That's how you know it's real, she said. The minute they start calling you to be quiet, that's when you speak louder. In another clip that has since been reposted thousands of times, Jaguar said, "This silence isn't about respect for the dead. It's about protecting the living who run everything, the living who get scared when truth starts leaking out." You think it's a coincidence that the media won't touch this story? Please. The silence is the proof. Her words hit a nerve. For Candace's followers, Jaguar's involvement felt like validation. A crossover moment where two of the most controversial, fearless voices from completely different worlds were saying the same thing. Charlie Kirk didn't just die. He was silenced. And Jaguar didn't stop there. She brought receipts of her own. Screenshots of messages, she says, came from people connected to the system. One message read, "They want this story gone before it spreads." Another said, "Too many eyes on the donors." Jaguar's commentary made it clear. This wasn't just a political conspiracy anymore. This was about media manipulation, controlled narratives, and elite networks working in tandem to hide their tracks. She even drew chilling parallels to past scandals. "This is how they do it every time," she said. Epstein, Prince, Nipsey, Diddy. The pattern never changes. The moment you start naming names, the moment you stop playing the game, they make you disappear, physically or digitally. Her passion reignited Candace's narrative at a crucial moment, just as mainstream outlets were starting to discredit it. Jaguar's raw, emotional delivery gave the story a heartbeat, turning what some called a political theory into what felt like a full-blown movement. People were stitching her clips with Candace's live stream, comparing notes, connecting dots. The comment sections read like digital war rooms. "They can't silence both of us," Jaguar said in one fiery moment. "They took Charlie, but they can't take all of us. Not this time." Her claim that the silence is to protect powerful figures became the new rallying cry. It was reposted with a black background and white text on thousands of accounts, spreading far beyond political audiences, reaching music fans, activists, and skeptics who normally wouldn't touch a story like this. For the first time, Candace's allegations weren't living in an echo chamber. They had crossed over into the cultural mainstream. Now, with Jaguar amplifying her message and a massive online movement demanding answers, Candace's countdown suddenly carried even more weight. This wasn't just one woman versus the system anymore. It was two voices, bold, unpredictable, and relentless, pushing the same narrative. Charlie Kirk's death wasn't an accident. It was an operation. And the truth they promised was coming. By day 5 of Candace's 7-day countdown, the story took another dramatic turn. The FBI announced the arrest of a 27-year-old man from Ohio named Tyler Robinson, calling him a key suspect in Charlie Kirk's death. Overnight, his mugshot was plastered across every major news outlet. According to the official press release, Tyler had acted alone, motivated by personal grievances and radicalization online. Federal agents described him as a lone wolf who meticulously planned the attack over months. But the details didn't add up. Almost immediately, independent journalists and Candace's followers began tearing apart the timeline. Tyler was a relatively unknown figure. No prior criminal record, no history of violence, no obvious ties to Charlie Kirk. The FBI presented him as a dangerous extremist, but his social media history looked strangely curated, like it had been scrubbed and rebuilt overnight. And then came the texts. Screenshots began circulating of supposed messages from Tyler to a handler in the days before the killing. The texts were odd, stilted, robotic, almost like they'd been generated by software. One read, "Target confirmed. Will execute as planned. No interference." Another, "Payment received. Silence ensured." The problem? They didn't sound human. Even grammar experts said the syntax matched AI-generated phrasing patterns. "This isn't how people text," one tech blogger wrote. "This is how a script writes." Candace seized on that immediately. She went live, holding up her phone with the screenshots visible, saying, "They want you to believe this young man sent these texts. But look at the language. This isn't a killer. This is a scapegoat. Tyler Robinson is their fall guy. She accused the FBI of fabricating or manipulating digital evidence to create a convenient patsy, someone who could take the fall while the real orchestrator stayed in the shadows. The public's curiosity deepened when Tyler's grandmother, a soft-spoken woman named Evelyn Robinson, gave an emotional interview to a local station. Standing on her porch with tears in her eyes, she said, "My grandson is not a killer. He never even owned a gun. He barely left the house except to go to work and church. This is not him. This is not who he is." Her words went viral, reframing Tyler not as a monster, but as a victim. Candace amplified Evelyn's plea, tweeting, "Listen to his grandmother. She's telling you the truth. The FBI needed a face, so they picked a boy who couldn't fight back." She compared it to other high-profile cases where convenient suspects emerged just as public scrutiny peaked. "Every time the public gets too close to the truth," she said, "they roll out a lone gunman. Always. And this time is no different." Meanwhile, the official narrative kept hardening. Prosecutors claimed Tyler had left a manifesto on an encrypted platform, but when pressed by reporters, they refused to release it. They said they had indisputable digital evidence, but every detail released to the press felt vague, redacted, or oddly cinematic, as if someone had written it for a movie. The alleged texts were printed in block font on PowerPoint slides at the press conference. No metadata, no context, no timestamps. The contrast between the two narratives, the FBI's and Candace's, couldn't be sharper. On one side, a dangerous extremist motivated by hate who acted alone. On the other, a young man with no record, framed by forces far larger than himself, whose only crime was being a convenient scapegoat. Candace told her audience, "Tyler Robinson is proof they're panicking. He's proof they're desperate. And he's proof they'll sacrifice anyone to protect the real killers." Adding to the unease was the fact that Tyler reportedly tried to call his grandmother from jail, but was denied access to a phone for security reasons. Evelyn told reporters, "They won't even let me talk to him. They won't let his lawyers see him. They're hiding him." That soundbite spread like wildfire, fueling the theory that Tyler was being silenced or coached into a confession he didn't write. Even neutral observers began to question the inconsistencies. One legal analyst on a primetime cable show admitted, "If this were any other case, the public would have already seen the evidence." The secrecy here is unusual, to say the least. As Candace's countdown neared its final days, the Tyler Robinson arrest became the fulcrum of her entire narrative. She framed it not as the end of the story, but as the smoking gun, the moment when the feds allegedly revealed their hand. "They don't care if this boy rots in prison," she said. "They care about keeping the circle of billionaires untouched." To Candace's followers, Tyler wasn't just a suspect. He was a symbol, proof that the system would always produce a scapegoat before it produced the truth. And as the clock ticked down to zero, the question looming over everything was no longer just who killed Charlie Kirk, but what will happen to Tyler Robinson before the truth comes out? By the seventh day, the world was holding its breath. Candace Owens' ultimatum, the one she'd been warning about all week, had finally reached 0 hour. For days, her posts had grown shorter, sharper, colder. Gone were the fiery rants and long live streams. In their place, silence and cryptic messages. One tweet read simply, "Midnight." Another, "They've been warned." No turning back. Every corner of the internet was watching. Her followers counted down like it was New Year's Eve, while journalists, politicians, and intelligence insiders whispered about what might be coming. Was she bluffing? Was she about to drop the list? The alleged circle of billionaires she claimed ordered Charlie Kirk's death? Or had someone already gotten to her? Rumors spread that Candace's phones had been tapped, that her home was under surveillance, that federal agents had been circling her property. Some said she'd gone into hiding. Others swore she was traveling with an encrypted hard drive and a team of whistleblowers. Screenshots leaked of emails she allegedly sent to 3 major networks, warning them that the truth will go live, with or without your cameras. The tension was unbearable. The billionaire plot had evolved into a full-blown standoff, a global system versus one woman. On one side, Candace, armed with files, screenshots, and her unshakable conviction that Charlie Kirk had been assassinated to protect powerful people. On the other, the most connected, untouchable figures in politics, media, and finance, backed by the FBI, billion-dollar corporations, and the silent weight of the establishment itself. In one of her last public statements before the deadline, Candace said, "They told me not to say his name again. They told me to back down. They think I'm scared, but I don't scare easy. If I die tomorrow, understand this. They did it because I refused to let them bury the truth." Her words sent shockwaves across social media. Hashtags like #TheList, #CandaceCountdown, and #They Silenced Charlie trended worldwide. Even people who had never followed her before were suddenly paying attention. TikToks, Twitter Spaces, and YouTube streams went live in real time as users speculated about what would happen when the clock hit zero. And yet, nothing happened. Midnight came and went. Her accounts went dark. Her website went offline. No names, no leaks, no list. For a moment, it felt like everything had evaporated, like the story had been swallowed whole by the same silent Jaguar Wright warned about. Then, 12 hours later, a single message appeared on one of Candace's backup channels. No video, no voice, just text. They moved faster than I expected. Files are safe. If anything happens to me, they know where to find them. That was it. No follow-up, no verification, just a chilling silence that felt louder than any revelation could have. The world was left divided, half believing she'd been silenced, half convinced she'd staged the entire thing. News anchors called it the most elaborate digital stunt of the decade. Her supporters called it proof she struck a nerve. And through it all, the FBI refused to comment. In the days that followed, whispers continued. Screenshots of encrypted messages allegedly tied to Candace's list surfaced briefly online before being deleted. Anonymous accounts claimed that certain billionaires had gone into private crisis mode. And yet, officially, nothing happened. No arrests, no leaks, no confirmation, just tension. The story faded, but it didn't die. It lingered, like smoke from fire no one could find. Because whether you believe Candace Owens or not, one truth remained impossible to ignore. She had rattled the system. One woman, standing against what she called a global web of power, had nearly cracked it open. And as her last message continued to circulate, files are safe. If anything happens to me, they know where to find them. One question echoed across the internet, whispered in every comment section, podcast, and group chat. If even half of this is true, what does that mean for all of us?